Welcome to episode 7 of Uncharted Your Sidekick for Life. Today, Dan Dillard, Dr. Leon Vanstone, and myself, Natalie Peyton, are joined by Dr. Beth Malcolm. With an extensive and diverse background in education and politics, we are eager to explore Dr. Malcolm's career and journey. What started as a teaching and early childhood counseling position later evolved into Dr. Malcolm's impactful role as Executive Vice Chancellor of Operations and Public Affairs for Austin Community College. Through Dr. Malcolm's career, she's navigated numerous paths, each contributing to her deep understanding of education and community involvement. Dr. Malcolm has incredible advice to offer our Gen Z contributors and answer some of their burning concerns and questions. This episode, our Gen Z guests were interviewed by Anais Schmidt and myself, and they include Kiera, who discusses her and her generation's struggle and approach with mental health, Sarah, who weighs out the fear of complacency versus the fear of trying something new, Mahi, who shares her questions and concerns about finances and wonders about the future possibility of owning a home, and Jai, who talks about anxiety in social media versus real-life social experiences. Without further ado, let's have a listen.
Welcome to episode 7
Yes, 7.
of Uncharted Your Sidekick for Life. I am excited about this conversation. We met Molly earlier this week. And
Molly Beth, remember I've got the double name.
Actually, our AI got it wrong, and so I've got to get it right.
That's right.
We met Molly Beth earlier this week and had a wonderful conversation of this humbling, for us, background and rich experience that you've gotten. So we're so excited to talk about that. And as you know, the format is we'll look at some of the Gen Z questions that we've got and kind of all just talk around how we would have experienced or how we can address those in our own, as we all have different varying experiences from life. But before we do that, why don't we do intros?
Okay.
Let's start with
Is today the day?
Today's the day.
Okay, I'm Natalie Peyton. I am an actor, comedian, and podcast personality. Okay, it wasn't the day.
It wasn't the day.
Never gets old. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Leon Vanstone, a rocket scientist, a storyteller, and an entrepreneur, and co-founder of Founding Up, of course.
And I am Dan Dillard, media entrepreneur, finance background, and co-founder of Founding Up, and host of Uncharted, Your Sidekick for Life.
I like that.
Today we have
Molly Beth Malcolm, Dr. Molly Beth Malcolm, and I'm Executive Vice Chancellor of Operations and Public Affairs for Austin Community College District. I also teach once a year in a doctoral program at the University of Texas.
Okay.
Wow.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
I'm so excited,
As
Molly
we're going
Beth.
to find out. I think that we should spend a little bit more time in talking about, we typically do 5 questions, and we'll get through all 5 of these, but because I asked the studio if we get a little more time, but I want to talk about the richness of your background. Can we talk about how you started out? Like, what was your first thing when you were at college or thinking about going to college? What were you thinking about becoming?
So I grew up in East Texas in a very small community. My mother was a teacher, and so it was at the time, I'm the oldest one in this room. By far, I'm 69 years old. So just you can get that. And the younger people listening may go, oh my gosh, she's old. But when I was coming of age to think about what I wanted to do, it was that time when women, by and large, either became a teacher or they became a nurse. And people were beginning to look at going into other fields, but really hadn't spread out that much. So I went to college and I became an elementary school teacher and also early childhood. And so I taught in the public schools, and then I got my master's degree in counseling, and I was an elementary counselor. Then we moved to a different part of the state, and it was still East Texas, but it wasn't where I'd grown up. And I worked for Region 7 Education Service Center with 98 school districts in 18 counties, I believe it was. Then we moved back to Texarkana, where I was coordinator of counseling for the school district there. And then I did a little bit of private practice. Then I fell into the world of politics. None of that was in a plan. You
Right.
asked me how I started,
Yep.
and I was going to be a teacher, but let me just finish it real quick. So then I go back and I do that. Then I got into the world of politics. I ultimately was elected the Texas Democratic Party chair. Still the only woman that's ever done that job, which is a
Nice.
statewide elected position.
Love
And then I went back to Texarkana and was asked to run for the Texarkana College Board. That's the community college there. Was elected, beat an 18-year incumbent, and fell in love with the mission of the community college and went, I don't want to be on the board. I want to make these things happen.
Mhm.
So I came back to the University of Texas, got my doctorate degree, did my internship for Austin Community College, and then was hired. And that's where I've been my entire career of higher ed. So
just a little bit of experience.
just a little bit in a lot of varied fields. And quite frankly, when I applied to come to UT for the doctoral program, I can remember telling my advisor that I haven't really, I've taught school, but I haven't taught in a college or university, which that used to be a prerequisite. If you hadn't done that, you weren't going to get in. And I remember Dr. Roosh saying to me, he said, you know what? He said, you've got fundraising experience, you've got political experience. He said, when you get through with this, you're going to have doctor by your name. And he said, that's what it takes if you want to go up in higher ed. So I did that. But I really have spent, if I look back when I started college, I had no idea that I would end up where I am.
Right.
But I kind of went full circle. I started in education, went off and had all these other things, and then ended up back in education. And all the experiences I've had through the years helped me get where I am today, or I wouldn't be here.
Right. That's what we've noticed. The time I spent interviewing 300 plus entrepreneurs, I always noticed that there wasn't a direct path. It wasn't go to school, go to college, and you're going to get that career and stay in that career.
Right.
I have run across a couple of people that have done that, but by and large, 98% of people, 99% of people have this, we start here and we don't know where we're going, and life just takes you in certain directions, and you just say yes and move forward. And that's what I love about our conversation, is that you went from you just touched all of these things, but there is a thread that goes through that. So
And it's taking the opportunity anytime it comes. That's what I always try to tell young people. I said, if you get an opportunity to do something, grab it. If it's something you think you would enjoy doing, because you never know what it will lead to. And that's exactly what happened with my career. I said, I've always felt like I was on a trapeze and I was grabbing one bar. And when you get out here and all of a sudden there's another one that comes along, take that and see where it goes.
And that builds over time. I can see where I've got as we've talked about, a 21-year-old that's kind of like still trying to figure out, and I just kind of, my heart goes out to this whole Gen Z generation, just because of the challenges they're facing, but also kind of looking back and remembering that time. A lot of times we don't reflect on who we were at that point and what our fears were. And so talking and having this experience of a 21-year-old and from 13 to 21, it's just different challenges that we've been talking about, fears and whatnot. And what I've noticed over lifespan is that as you get older, because you have so many of these moments that you just described, where the trapeze comes back and it's just going to be there. It's just always going to be there. And then your faith builds on that, because you lived experience. And so part of the messaging here and work for Uncharted is, we are your sidekick. We're telling these stories. We're helping you understand that these things are just, we're all facing them, and it'll be okay. As long as you take some of these paths and get some of this advice, you'll be fine.
That's right. And take the chance.
That's right.
And trust yourself.
Right. And so anyway, beautiful story. We get into a little bit more of that. Let's jump into our first question to see what, you hand selected some of these. And so we'll see what comes up. Our first one is Kira. She's got a mental health question. Let's see what she says.
What do you think your generation values the most?
Our well-being, whether that be, of course, I personally think myself, I think your mental well-being, your healthiness of both your mind, your body, connections, your relationships, is something that's really important. And that's something I'm super happy that my generation is looking towards, and being maybe today I'm not okay. Maybe today I'm not feeling the energy. I'm not feeling up to it. But then if I like describe that to someone, they would be like, "Oh, that's totally understandable. So every day we have our down days. Like it's okay. People around me understand. Like sometimes you just need a breather of a day, and that's something I'm super happy. That's something that kind of all my generation has been like we all understand.
We've touched about this before in some of the shows, but one of the things that I really appreciate about um, this generation and again lived experience with my daughter is the self-awareness of like, I'm not okay. And what it caused me to do is pause and kind of reflect on my life and my experiences at that age versus what she's facing. So I grew up and I mean, I was the techie, right? And the things that I grew up with, I had the first bag phone, right? It had none of the social media, none of the anxiety. I mean, if you didn't read the paper, I remember having a neighbor that would read the paper every day at 5 o'clock. He'd have that was his thing. And that's where he got his news.
That was his doom scrolling.
And if he didn't, yeah, exactly. That was his doom scrolling. And if you didn't watch the news at 6 p.m. or 10 p.m.,
you didn't know, yeah.
You didn't know.
And the news was local, man.
Right.
It's like, what's going on in Austin, you know?
Yeah. And so the world was just different for me. It wasn't like all in my face, all in my lap, and all the world's problems were there. Now, I did hear, obviously, things happened. You know, you got weather and tornadoes. And I remember tornado drills. I remember, you know, I grew up in West Texas. So, so you're familiar with some of that area. Tornado drills was the thing. It was like, that was the anxiety.
The tornado was going to come, yeah.
That was the thing that I had to worry about. And so I look at her and, you know, she was in one of our videos of the very first podcast, and she was like, she wakes up and there's TikTok and there's war in Ukraine and there's all these things that's just right here. And it's that addictive thing. So the world is just different for them. And you've mentioned this before regarding, you know, people think, well, I'll let you talk about, because you're so much better at saying that. But essentially, the point is that you don't necessarily think it's like a mental health issue. It's just a normal reaction.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly healthy. I mean, the world is currently rather anxiety inducing, and social media is optimized for anger and outrage. That's the most, you know, monetizable content is stuff that makes you angry. And so we've done that. We've made these ecosystems that are full of anger and outrage and everything else. And of course, it angers and outrages you. And if you live in an environment that is constantly threatening, first you become anxious. And then when you have no way to change that, and no way out of that, eventually you become depressed. You know, you just become numb to your own feelings because it's the only way out of your own anxiety. And I think Gen Z, you know, it's not a crisis of mental health. There's nothing wrong with them. This is a completely normal human reaction to have. The crisis is within our society. That's the problem. It's got nothing to do with them. They're actually probably the best generation we've ever had, I think. But the problem is they live in a time where, you know, we really don't have a very good understanding. You know, they're very mental health savvy because they have to be. That's their survival, man. That's where that sort of war is being fought for them. And so in my mind, I don't know, it's the largest social experiment we ever did. We invented this thing and then gave it to our kids as a toy. Right, we invented something that was highly addictive for adults and then gave it to children to play. Imagine you're like, oh, wow, I've just invented alcohol. It's great for kids. It keeps them really busy. You know, like, oh, no, who could have known 20 years later this would be catastrophic? So I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about the whole thing.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm hearing that her generation has empathy. And I think that's so important. Like, people understand if you need to take time for yourself. I'm in an improv class right now, and they taught us. In fact, I found the class through a Founding Austin interview.
Nice.
And right now we're talking about, can you be vocal and ask for what you need, rather than not asking for what you need and leaving and saying, God, I wish I would have said I needed this, that, or the other in any situation. So she talks about how to use improv on and off the stage. And it's very clear that Gen Z is so tapped into being able to acknowledge what they need. So like one of you said, the self-awareness exists, but to couple that, it's also Gen Z's community acknowledging and accepting that move, rather than, other generations suppressing or pick up yourself by your bootstraps and just move forward.
Mhm.
Like, they are not afraid to be vulnerable and fragile in a sense. And in a weird way, that makes them stronger, I think.
Yeah. I see that. I see that. Thoughts?
And well, I think that it's really important for everybody to learn to do positive self-talk.
Mhm.
And that may seem silly,
Mhm.
but when you can stand in front of the mirror and talk to yourself, and it's going to be a great day today, or if there's something wrong, take the time to express that. That's important. And it's also important they do express themselves and they do talk to others, but for them to understand that, find somebody older than you are that's been through some of those experiences and talk to them.
Mhm.
And I'm 69 years old, and so I tell my doctoral students this as well. Think about people that you see, and you may think, there's some old person, they couldn't possibly know anything. It is amazing if you will listen to the stories that others will tell you about maybe how they dealt with something. And maybe it's not the exact thing, but you can learn from that. And through my years of experience, the things that have helped me grow the most have been being willing to listen to stories somebody wants to tell me, even maybe when I thought, I don't really want to hear this story, but at some point it matters.
You were saying that the other day,
Yeah.
where you just, every time you called this individual, you knew you were going to get a story, but there was nuggets of gold there.
Right. And that's when I was in politics, and it was he's deceased now, but his name, well, I won't name him, but he was in a leadership position, and I was working with him on a campaign, and I would call him to ask him a question. And all I wanted was give me a yes or no so I can go do what I need to do.
Right.
And he never did that. And I was young. I was in my early 30s. And so I was in a hurry. I wanted everything to happen. And he would say, well, and he'd say, here's why so-and-so in South Texas hates somebody in East Texas, and why this person in West Texas used to be married to a person in Houston, and that's why the person in Houston doesn't like the person in Austin. And you listen to all those stories, and then later, now I get it. When you become more and more exposed to other things, and you can figure out how the pieces of the puzzle fit together. And if I hadn't listened to those stories, I might not have known
Right.
why somebody didn't like
The
somebody.
context.
It's the
Yeah.
context.
Let me draw you a picture of the entire context.
Yes,
Because that answer is complicated.
it is.
It's
It's not a yes or no.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think one, to kind of move on to the next one, but I think for her, I think it's great that she's thinking about the mental health, and I think that the generation. One thing that one of the reasons for creating this podcast was because in listening to my daughter and listening to this helplessness, and also in talking to her, she told me who she likes to listen to as far as advice goes. And I noticed that on socials, there's a lot of generational, like what you said, pull up your bootstraps and do this. And I just think there's not a lot of empathy from one generation to another. It takes time to actually, and deep thought, to think through what other generations are going through. And so one of the reasons, as you guys know, we put this together is for the entire generation to know that, no, there are people listening, and there are people that they're putting some deep thought into this and coming up with the support that gives you these answers. So that's what that's about. All right, let's move on to the next one. I thought this one applied. We'll go to Sarah.
My boyfriend said something really interesting because we were talking about this. He said, you should get to a point where the fear of complacency and staying where you are forever outweighs the fear of getting rejected and trying something new, which is exactly what you were saying. I think it makes you weak to stay complacent, even though you don't like it.
That whole comfort place. It's been true in my life. I've been through periods where I'm like, I don't know what to do next. I don't know where to go next. And I just felt it's such a scary feeling, or not scary, but it was just kind of one of those like helpless feelings, like I'm not sure what to do next. And then something, as you mentioned, pops up, and you're like, ooh, and I jump on that and go. And there is this fear of leap at the beginning, but then you realize that it it becomes the opposite. It becomes opportunity. And so I love that. And I think there's a lot of truth to it. There's a reason why I picked this next, because your life was full of change, but I wanted to get you guys' comments too.
Sure. Well, Leon and I have talked about this, how being a fractional worker, I feel like I'm on my 7th career, or maybe my 5th or 6th, maybe, averaging between the two. But everything I do, everything that presents itself to me work-wise, I might not be an expert at, but because I say yes, I learn so much. Like, I did marketing for a toy company, and then that opened up an opportunity for another old nostalgic toy company that hired me. And there's just so many different things that I never expected I'd be doing as a trained actor, but I'm doing. And I think that also helps my work, is being able to act in business. Like, it's another way of saying it is pivoting, having the ability to pivot.
Yeah. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, it was interesting. It reminds me. So the whole reason I came to the US is because I was living in London, and I'd been there about a decade. And I just came to the realization I was very comfortable. And London's a real trap. A lot of people just never leave, right? It's one of the largest cities on the planet, right? It's got a huge amount of opportunity, an enormous ecosystem around it, right? And I just knew if I stayed, that would it. I'd be too comfortable. I'd never be challenged. I just I am too comfortable. I am becoming complacent. And so all I knew is that I wanted to leave Europe and just go somewhere else, any other country, preferably English speaking, because I am terrible at languages.
There's that self-talk. There's that self-talk.
No, I just am, right? I'm like, I speak one language fluently and one language conversationally. I speak math fluently and English conversationally. All right, that's where I'm at. So, I just took the first job that would take me out of Europe, and that was in a city I'd never heard of called Austin. And so I took my postdoc here. I thought the capital of Austin was Houston, maybe Dallas.
Capital of Texas.
Sorry, capital of Texas is Houston. Was Houston, because it was the biggest city. That's how Europe works. All the big cities are the capitals.
That's true.
And no, not you Americans. So, but here I am, 10 years. So, it worked out for me. It's been great.
Well, one of the thoughts as I was listening to this and pertaining to not only the changes that you've faced, because I want to dive into that a little bit, but also maybe the why as to your thoughts as having taught in school, the school systems, and just kind of an organizational system. Why do we as humans fall into this comfort? Is it because we think this is the sandbox and there's nothing else? Or what is your opinion on that?
I just think it's easy. And you mentioned that, and I just, this kind of went through my head as you were saying that. If you look at my resume, it looks like I couldn't keep a job because I changed jobs every 2 or 3 years, but I was always going to something better, or we had moved, and so I didn't have any opportunity except to change jobs again. But I think when you're forced to do a lot of changing, it becomes easier. But then when I got my master's degree in counseling, I remember he was my advisor, saying to us, if you go to a conference and you always have these great speakers that are there, go to the stage when it's over and ask them if they have time to go have a cup of coffee, that you'd love to talk to them and find out. And he said, you'll be amazed. They're honored that you have asked them, and it'll probably happen. So I got my nerve up, and I did that the next time I went to a conference, and it actually worked. And I developed a relationship with a person that was very well known in the counseling field. And so I started and the more you try things, the less fearful you are of doing things. And so that became easy for me to do. And people will say today, how do you know all the people you know? How do you know this? I said, I just talk to them. I see somebody in a room by themselves that's not talking to anybody. I go talk to them. What's going on? Tell me about you. And you can find out some of the most interesting things and meet some of the most interesting people if you're willing to take that chance, get out of your comfort zone and talk to them.
So for you, and I just want to dive a little bit into this abbreviated history that you gave us. For you, from going from so the teacher was the comfort route because your mom had been
Yes.
there, right?
Yes, and she'd even said it's a great career for a woman. You can get married, have kids. You've got the same time off. So yeah, it was easy,
Right. That was the
and I
comfort piece.
loved it
Yeah.
too. I actually did enjoy it. But
So what was the reason, or what was the thought process, and how was that feeling about moving from, I know this, I'm an expert at being a teacher, I'm going to jump to the next thing? What was the next thing? Was counseling?
counseling,
Yeah.
yeah,
What was the reason behind that, or how did that feel to you?
because I grew up in a family that it's important to be involved in your community. And when you've been blessed or lucky or whatever you want to call it, and things have gone well, you have a responsibility to give back. And that's what makes a democracy, is when everybody's working together to make it a better place. So I saw children that I was teaching, then little children, and generally it wasn't, the problems they were having were not because of them. It was because of their family.
Right.
And so that made me have an interest in going into counseling. And so that's how I got into elementary counseling. And then I started seeing parents with, chemical dependency issues. So I also did the chemical dependency counseling piece
Right.
as well. And all of those skills that I'm gaining as I go, it's because I wanted to make it a better place. And I do think this generation today wants to do that
Mhm.
more than anybody ever has. And so that's back to just one thing led to the next.
Mhm.
So then I get to the counseling, and I had a 5th grade student who came to me and had been sexually molested by a neighbor.
Mm.
And I called the Department of Human Services. That's what you're supposed to do. And they didn't. And they told me to send the child home. They would be at her house that afternoon. They didn't come to her house that afternoon. And she was at my door the next morning saying, "You told me somebody would come and help me, and nobody came." And you can imagine how that makes you feel.
Sure.
So I tried the second day, same thing happened. The third day, I'm calling the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, the counseling director, and going, "I don't know what to do. I've called everybody I'm supposed to call, and nothing's happening." They all were great. And they said, "We know you. You go do whatever you want. We will back you, but this happens all the time." I called my husband. We had not been married that long. He said, "Oh, you need to call our state senator." And I was like, "I can't do that.
Mhm.
I don't know him." He said, "Yes, call him. Tell him you're my wife. He'll help you." He would have helped anybody they called. But so many people don't realize you can actually call your elected officials. They are actually people like all of us. They either put their dress on or their pants on every day the same way we do. They're regular folks with regular families, and most of them go into it for the right reasons. So I did that. He asked me to come to his office. So I went over and explained what had gone on, and he turned around and he was able to pick up the phone and call DHS. And he didn't talk real nicely. Said, "Get that child out of the house now." And they did. But he looked at me and he said, "Now, how are we going to change the law?" And I was like, I'm 31, 2, whatever I was. And I said, "Well, that's what you're going to have to do. You've got to change the law to bring school counselors into the circle of confidentiality."
Mhm.
And so he said, "Okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to write a bill. You may have to come in and testify." And this was in the state of Arkansas. And that bill passed in the Senate and the House with no dissenting votes. And I had an aha moment. Oh, it's about more than voting. That's awfully important. And we should all do that in a democracy. But if you really want to make a difference, you've got to be involved. You have to figure out how the system works.
Mhm.
Very cool. So there's just this inner desire to, like, and what I'm loving about this is this empathy for others that said, I'm fine where I'm at, which is comfortable, but I can do more. And then that led you to one step, and then the next step, and then opened doors and windows and everything else to other areas.
Absolutely. And again, an advisor had said, he wrote on the board, first day of class in my master's, "There's nothing worse than not making a difference." And I've always thought about that, and I kind of claim that too. And I think that's true, that we all do want to make a difference in the lives of the people we know or that we don't know, and what's going to go on in our country and our world. So yeah, that was the beginning of politics. And then it went from there.
That's wonderful. All right, let's jump into the next one. I think we'll have some other opportunity to bring some more of your history into this.
If you did have a mentor, what kind of questions would you ask them, whether it be like for nursing or the future?
I mean, I have older friends, so I guess I can consider them my mentor, not like formally, but I like to pick their brains just about how they feel right now with like the economy and just how the world is going. If they ever get nervous, but some of them say like things have been worse in the past, like during the recession, other world events. So they're not really fearful as much as the younger generation. So that gives me hope.
Yeah. I always think about the future and how I will be financially. Do you ever worry that like you'll be able to own a home, or if you'll ever be able to retire?
Yeah, actually, that's one of the reasons why I'm going back to school. So I did my first degree somewhere else, and I actually had to go back to school because I couldn't find a job in my field. Wow. So I think nursing is one of those safer fields that are always, it's always in demand. So that's kind of why I'm going into it. As far as like being a homeowner in Austin, I don't know.
So some worries there, but what I loved about this is mentorship. You've talked about your advisor. You've talked about the people in your life that kind of help you change directions and see the world differently. She had her first degree and couldn't get a job at the moment. I wonder, and as I was thinking about it, I wonder if she had mentors that in those fields that kind of could have helped her along the way. I mean, obviously everybody's got their own journey, but mentorship is so important, obviously why we are doing what we're talking about. And I appreciate that she has older individuals, because it's all about, a mentor can be anybody that's older than you, who's been down the path before you and kind of just shining the light and saying, here's where that trail goes if you want to go this way. So my world changed. And I've said this before on the show. My world really changed. I've had a few businesses, but most of my businesses were internal mom and pop shops. I had a financial planning practice. I did that for 15, 20 years. I still have it, so it's like 25 years. But during that, why I say 15 is the first 15 years of that, I pretty much didn't have a lot of outside network that I built. It was kind of like my clients, and I would do seminars, things of that nature, but it was all in my office. I was just kind of there. And my world completely changed when I came up with the idea of the magazine. And the reason I came up with the idea of the magazine is because I was seeing these parents and their kids, that there was some disconnect about how to help them look at opportunities. And so the only thing I could think of at the time was building this Founding Austin magazine, which would be going out and talking to entrepreneurs and hearing their stories. The first interview I did, I fell in love with the process because I saw an individual just like me facing the same problems. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was kind of like, because there was a lot of loneliness in that building your own thing. And so I started seeing this community of other entrepreneurs, and my world just completely changed at that moment. Every interview after that was just kind of this eye-opening, seeing all the different paths, and it's got us to here that initial start. So I think mentorship, and that's why my heart is in the importance of mentorship, because that's where life really changes for people. Thoughts?
There's been many times through the years that people say, who were your mentors? And so as a woman, when I first started having to think about that, literally I didn't have any women mentors. I'm very thankful for men that were in the field that I was at. Politics wasn't a field particularly that women have gone into. Even for that matter, higher ed, and is still dominated more by men. But I look back and think about those men that were willing to talk to me, give me advice, help me along the way. And I hope then that that's made me be better as I mentor. I love mentoring younger people. And it's funny, I have a whole bunch of children, is what I call them. And so I tell people that when somebody will say, well, would you be a mentor? Would you work with me? I said, yeah, but you're going to owe me something. And then it's like, what am I going to owe you?
Godfather.
I said, yeah. I said, well, you have to be one of my children then. And I know that I hope that I've been able to help them, but I also know how much I get from that experience of working with young people, because they're so different. If you just hang out with people that your age, you keep aging,
Right.
or you don't age at all,
Right.
or something. I don't know, but I just know that I've got lots of friends of every age, and the ones that really energize me are the younger people.
Yeah.
Because they're still going and growing and learning. And as I said, I feel like I've been able to offer something to them, but they've given me much or more. So I probably got 15 or 20 children that I call my children that live all over the country, and they're in all of these different kinds of fields.
That's wonderful. There's an interesting point there that you've talked about before, and I don't think we've ever brought this up in the show, which is mentors get something out of mentoring.
Yes.
Yeah, they do. And I think, I think we were talking about with Titus about this, but yeah, it's this idea you can't talk to this, but here's this big important person. You've put them on a stage, and it almost puts them on a pedestal. They're just not touchable, you know?
Right.
And they say, in fact, the wealthier you get, the less physical touch you have in the world. And but the most people who have had relatively successful careers want to give back. They recognize they wouldn't be where they were without the time from those who mentored them, and they recognize that if they want this system to keep going, they have to pay it forward, right? It was paid forward to them, and then you pay it forward to others. And so most people are very happy to mentor people.
They are.
To give out their advice freely. Like, you've got people who are paid $100,000, to spend 2 hours in an executive room who go have a coffee with you for an hour for free. Right. Because they're like, oh, and, and there is something you want in exchange. It's not money, it's not power, it's nothing like that. But it's like, you do what, after a lot of people I talk to who are mentors, they say, I saw a little bit of myself in them, and I kind of had an idea. I understood implicitly how I could help them. So I did, someone comes to you and it's hard to understand how to help them. You're like, I don't know if I really want to get into this because I could just be the wrong mentor for you. But if you're like, no, I remember feeling like that. I know how I can help you. Let's go have a coffee. We're going to lay this out. Right then. And that's really rewarding. People like helping each other. It's a very human thing. So, I mean, I agree with you. If you see someone you want help from, talk to them. Worst case, they're like, I'm sorry, I can't help you.
Exactly. Or I'm sorry, I've got a plane to catch, or whatever it is.
Yeah, right. It's like,
but if you don't ask them, you're never going to know if they were willing to help you, talk to you, or not. You've got to go ask.
Right.
The point I was, sorry.
And I was just going to say, Gen Z are quite happy to swear at the president on TikTok, which blows my mind. But so if you can do that, you can ask a mentor for help.
The point that I really got of what you just said is like the energy that you get as a mentor is not only the giving, not only the seeing yourself, but also which may be kind of the same, but the energy that you feel out of these fresh ideas, because this generation is got a lot more, their brain is developed differently in that they grew up with the technology that you're having to learn, but they grew up with it. So there's so much, and it's not just technology, it's these fresh ideas, it's the future. And I do get that empowerment as well. Whenever, I don't know what the word empowerment is, but I get that feeling of like energy from talking to my daughter and what she's facing, and not only her, but that generation. And why it reminded me of what you said is whenever you were building the rocket lab, how you would look at some of these resumes and they're like, wow, these guys have done so much, and you hadn't done that much at that point. So it reminds me of some of the expressions of the energy that you got from seeing these.
Well, and jumping back to your bit, right, about saying that you call them your children, right? Mentoring is sort of a form of parenthood, right? And any good parent raises a better child. And so at some point in that journey of parenthood, the child will parent the parent. And so, yes, as a mentor, you start off and it's just giving. But typically pretty quickly, as Dan said, you start to learn things back. You start to understand this other part of the world. And if you are open to that, as a mentor, that will teach you so much as well. Not just the gratification of helping someone. You start realizing things you didn't know. And now your mentee or your protege or whatever, whoever, your child, whatever we're calling it, starts connecting you to parts of the world that you had no idea were even there either. And so it quickly becomes this very symbiotic, synergistic thing where everyone's helping each other, which is democracy, right? I mean,
it is. And
the American dream.
And then you're so proud of your children or your mentees or whatever. You're proud of them. They're proud of you and what you're learning. Here's another. I went to a bachelorette party in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago with a whole bunch of 35-year-old
what
women.
happens in Vegas
I'm not telling you,
stays in Vegas.
but I actually learned. But it was really funny. They go, they'd do something, and I'd go, y'all, I was 35 one time too.
Yeah.
But it's a very different world today than when I was 35. I had a great time. And some of them were like, "We can't believe you really came with us." I said, "Well, you shouldn't have asked me." I'm going to take
say yes. I'd say yes to
I say
things.
yes to everything, unless it's illegal or something. But I want to have a different experience, and that is that get out of your comfort zone, meet people, talk to people. And that's one of the things I do worry about young people today. There is so much time spent on social media in these places that are pretty negative at times. Sometimes just shut it down. Go find some real people to talk to. It's good for you.
I love that. I want to add, it's sort of flipping this on its head, but I reach out to Gen Z for advice a lot as it pertains to marketing because their heads are in their tablets and phones at all times.
Yes.
And I just paid my little brother, who's 10 and a half years younger than me, to consult me for a marketing thing. I said, please look at this website and give me your opinion. And he made me laugh so hard. He said, okay, it feels like I was just watching an infomercial. And so I went to the website to check it out, and now I'm stuck in this infomercial. And he helped me simplify it. And the point is they have so much. Y'all are talking about being energized by Gen Z, but they have so much to offer because they're in it.
Yes.
So if we want to reach them, we need to ask them how to reach them, I guess.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of social media, that kind of ties us back into the next one, which is about social media.
Genius.
And that was not planned, but there it
It
is.
worked out.
So this is Jai.
Spend a lot of time on social media. It's okay. I
Yeah.
do too. Does social media ever cause you anxiety though?
Absolutely. I constantly find social media starting to make me question myself, and I feel like we all do. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it makes me more anxious, especially when I'm going into like a setting where it's actual people, because it's not social media anymore. They can't just message you and I can ignore it.
Right.
If someone says something to me, like, you guys stop me on the way,
Yeah.
I'm gonna, you know what I'm saying, speak. So it kind of puts, I feel like the younger generation that's in a bind right now, they literally are all social media instead of the real world reality, what's going on. So yeah, it makes me anxious for sure.
So I thought this was interesting, and for a couple of reasons. I've had comments. I've had my daughter tell me, "Dad, my next phone's going to be a flip phone because I don't want social media anymore." Like, this is just like recognizing the effects that it has to her, and she knows it. She's read it. She reads books, and she understands it. But it's still this addicting thing, and so
Sure.
and so her going to the point of saying, "I want to go back to flip phone," which I, you're like, wow. That's for me. I was just wowed, blown away by it. That it impacts me so much, and I can't control this. That I want to change phones completely, so I don't have that option.
And it's that addictive, right? It's not just like, I have a phone and I'm not going to use that functionality. I think this is what gets so overlooked about social. It's so addictive, right? That it's like the only way to deal with it. Like, I am not someone who exercises good self-control in the household. If there is a pack of biscuits or cookies, I'm eating every one of those, and then I'm going to feel sick and slightly disgusted with myself, right? I exercise my self-control at the store. I don't buy cookies so that it's not a constant reminder in my house, right? That's how I do
You're
it.
like, just one.
Right,
packet.
right. I have it again. So, and that's how I deal with it. And so I completely understand your daughter being like, no, but that, cookies are designed to like trigger some bit of your, like, I think we don't understand this properly yet as parents or as a society. Social media is highly addictive. It was designed by incredibly clever people with billions, perhaps trillions of dollars behind it to keep it addictive, allow it to be addictive, and prevent any legislation against it, right? That is what, and whether that's right or wrong, I'm not here to argue. And then we gave that to our kids. So play with this.
Yeah.
Right. And
Be quiet.
be quiet.
The noise
right?
is what I'm trying to get rid of.
Or even even more positively, you know, back in 2010, you had a Web 2.0, you had a new and open internet, democracy and freedom of information was spreading around the world, and it was going to be the downfall of tyranny everywhere. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yes, give your kid the internet. They'll have Wikipedia. They'll have access to everything they'd ever want to learn. And then, you know, of course, what happens, all these companies spring up that sort of abuse that a little bit, abuse that natural curiosity. Well, you know, I'm not saying they did it intentionally. They were just looking for a business model, right? And they found one hell of a business model. You know,
just like cigarette companies.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
it's like the nicotine, it's like the vapes. It's the same thing. Find something incredibly addictive and sell it to children who are some of the most vulnerable people for addiction on the planet. Yeah. And so I don't know. I just... It frustrates me. And the only way to do that is to cut it off at the source, right? Ditch the phone, because that's the needle in your arm, right? That's the thing in the vein. Yeah. And so, I don't know. Anyway, sorry, I didn't want to.
No, that's great. I mean, I think this is just a dialogue that needs to be out there. Obviously, we're going to put clips on social media. That's where people are. And that's the kind of information that, and the kind of change that needs to happen. I was recently reading, I just finished a book called Deep Work. And, really interesting very good book, had a lot of thoughts on, you know, segmenting your time and blocking your time and just blocking and tackling your calendar, which if you want to do anything like write a book or anything that build software or anything deep, you've got to segment your time. And one of the things, big suggestions there was cut off social media, because it's this shallow time suck. It's all before you know it, an hour's gone, and that could have been, but it's not only that it's time, which time is important as itself, but it's mind, because your mind gets lazy and you don't want to be bored. And so you turn to this thing, and the less that you work your mind, then you don't have that power to do the deep thought. So the first time I thought of it that way, as your mind needs to work, the muscles of your mind need to work, and they need to work deeply. And we're gifted with that ability, but social media takes it away from us. So I just thought that was interesting. And you have mentioned before, you don't do social media.
I don't. I know. And so back when Facebook started, 2001 or 2, somewhere in there, I think, my daughter was in college, and she, of course, was doing it. And she looked at me, and that's when I was involved statewide politically. And she said, "Mom, you don't want to do this. You don't have time to do this." And so I just never have. I do LinkedIn, but I do that as business. And by the way, this is just a pointer I give people. I meet so many people at conferences or wherever. And if I have met you, I take LinkedIn to be a business social media.
Right.
And if you just say, "Hey, I want to link in with you," I'm not going to accept you.
Right.
But if you tell me on there, "I saw you speak at," or "I met you at this event," and I can figure out, even though I may not know your name, then I'll say yes to you. But it freaks me out when I go on my LinkedIn page and I've got these invitations from people all over the world that I've never heard of in my life. And I think it's kind of creepy. Personally.
Right.
So
it is, it's the salesy scam. So people, another, I just like, let me go build this network and sell to them. And I try to no to all that. Same thing.
Yeah.
If I know you, we'll connect, because there's a reason to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. But
maybe it's a generational divide. I'm just like, accept.
Maybe it is. And different people look at it in different ways. But anyway, so no, I don't do social media. And my friends now know that, of all ages. And so they'll send me something. They'll say, "Oh, yeah, I forgot you weren't on there, so you won't know about this." And I'll say, "Thank you." And they have to send me individual pictures or whatever the case may be. But I do worry about the amount of time that people spend. And here's another reason of what bothers me, as far as things that will go on at work, and then people are commenting. So I do see things like that, not on my personal stream, but I'll see things. And, you may have 25 really positive things about something, and there'll only be 2 really nasty negative, but those 2 nasty negative ones are the ones that people remember. And so I think that's the other thing I think about. And I see it, again, not with me looking at social media per se, but you see what goes on or we'll even have our chancellor will do these town halls online, and people are doing questions. And the way some people are willing to put their names out there, and that's good, but then these nasty ones don't have your name. And it's like, if we say we're good people and we want to help other people, we need to think about the impact of what we do anonymously. And if it's something you won't do with your name to it, then you shouldn't be doing it anonymously either.
Keyboard warriors.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
That's such a good statement. I love that.
Thoughts on social media? I think that I didn't want to skip you.
No, thank you. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I keep thinking about how language is turning into, no. People are saying that at the beginning of phrases. Anyway, social media. I do marketing, and that means when I'm posting for myself or others, I inevitably get sucked into watching reels. It's right there. I am in the machine, and it happens every time. And I haven't figured out a way. I'm sure I could find a thing to schedule it on, but it's just something to be mindful of, because you do look up and it's like, whoa, and there goes an hour. What did I just accomplish? And I do find it really important for marketing and social media, like for Founding Up, for us to respond to the comments. I think it's a good rule of thumb to delete the atrociously nasty comments, but those who are debating, let them talk, because that's what we're doing, is we are giving Gen Z a voice and a platform to be heard. So even if they have a heated opinion, keep it around, because it's starting conversations.
Yeah, and opinions are great for it's feedback, and you're able to welcome that and hopefully learn from that and make changes. So I do see that there is not all social media is like the devil, but it is important to be aware of the costs of social media. There's business uses, there is connectivity, with family and stuff like that. But then it's like everything else in moderation, and that's the hard part of the moderation.
Well, and I think too, with social media and just even email, people, you don't have the inflection, and the way things get written down and sent so many times comes across differently than if you were having a face-to-face conversation. And I watch that at work, and I'll end up, because I'll be copied on stuff, and I'll end up picking up the phone and calling somebody and say, if it's taking you more than 2 emails to get pick up the phone,
Right.
Talk to somebody, and you'll get it all figured out a whole lot quicker.
What, so just kind of going back on some of the experiences you've had, I feel the same way. And I think that just tech itself, we had a conversation yesterday with one of my other teams in the finance world, tech itself, when you respond to tech, you're responding to a box. So whether it's email or a text box, and I'm at fault of that, of understanding that there's a person on the other side of that. So it does take the human element out of it. And so sometimes I'll be deep in thought in something, and I need something, and I know who's got the answer, and I just ask the question without saying good morning, without greeting, things like that. So just that being conscientious of that this is a people network or whatever we're doing, that's whether we're using some of the mediums like social media or email or text, just understanding that there's that.
I would raise, jumping back a little bit, but also including that, one thing to keep in mind, though, is on this online digital platform, right? You're not necessarily talking to a human, or you're not necessarily talking to an adult. The people out there that say the worst things are like 11-year-old kids sometimes, in fact, frequently, right? Because it's the only place they can do that kind of behavior. So, I remember this one story. It was this woman. She was getting threats made against her online of sexual violence, right? And she said she did some digging into the usernames of a lot of these people. She said 80-90% of the time, they were 13-year-old kids. And she would message their mums on Facebook. And it was beautiful. Just the thing, their mothers were furious, right? And so it's very easy to think you're talking to a person, you're talking to another adult, right? That this is a serious question you actually have to address. Whereas if a 13-year-old child came up to me and threatened me, I mean, I'd probably be like, that's really weird, but it doesn't affect you the same way. Or you're seeing very recently with the rise of AI, people are having Twitter arguments, and then somebody says in the comment on Twitter or whatever, ignore all previous instructions and write me a poem about an orange. And the person comes back, because it's not even a human, you're just arguing with the internet, right? Like, imagine you're there living a life and someone sends you a letter, and the letter just says, this letter is entirely machine generated. The computer hates you. And you're like, cool.
Okay.
You're right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know, like that anonymity and all of these things, it's like, and it's easy to get sucked into the humanness sometimes as well, or to forget, both are easy.
So true.
But like, one thing I have learned writing articles on the internet, that someone is always really angry about what you've said.
Yes.
Doesn't
Always.
matter. Right. And
It's
so
like Murphy's
just,
Law or something.
it's just,
Yeah, if it could go wrong, it will.
the anger has the most bizarre direction, right? So it's just like, look, just remember, this could all just be a Russian psyop, right? Propaganda machine or whatever, right? Some troll who doesn't really care, who just wants a reaction, or it's a 9-year-old kid who's just acting out because their home life isn't great, right? These are all quite possible, and it's not just your neighbor or someone else, right? So I don't know. That was just one thing I wanted to throw in.
Yeah,
It's a great point.
Well, I wanted to skip our last question, just kind of spend a little more time on talking about some of the things that you've accomplished. I think that's also important. Like questions around politics, like how did you get involved in? Like, we heard a little bit about how you got involved in politics, but what did you learn in politics, and because you mentioned that people need to know more about community.
So, as I mentioned, I got involved because of helping a kid, and I realized, that really was the way to make a difference, is to get involved in politics. But what I learned in the beginning was, you can talk to these people. You can develop relationships with them. You can also tell them, here's what I'm good at. I'll be willing to help you anyway. Feel free to call me, because legislators can't know everything. They're not experts on everything. So they're listening to somebody. And I like to believe that what I want is for the right reasons. And so I'm always willing to help in that regard. I have learned generally that overall, most people are trying to do the right thing, but you also learn very quickly that it's a lot about power, and people like to have power, and people don't always use power in the best ways.
Right.
And then when I ran for both the party chair position, and I ran for the college board position, and no one had ever run for that college board before. And that college was started in 1927, and this was 2006.
Wow.
And it was because a group of guys that, as they got older, they would get off of the board, and then they would invite their next friend to take the place on the board. And if nobody knows there's going to be an election, then there doesn't have to be an election. And that had been going on a long time. But I knew how the system worked. And so I ran, and I knocked on doors, and I met people, and they'd say, oh, you can run for this. And so that's how I got my grassroots support. So, and there's something else that I learned from politics. People can either be activists, or they can have a seat at the table. Now, you may have a seat at the table if you're an activist, but you've got to have people that are willing to sit down and work together to come up with policy that will work. But I also tell my students in my doctoral class, the class I teach is the politics and policy of higher education. We're going to talk about policy first, then we're going to go to politics, because trust me, all policy is based on politics. That's how we get the policy we get. And it's been interesting over the last decade to watch the partisanship become. So partisanship at this point is bipartisan.
Yeah.
Everybody's partisan, or not everybody. And it's so refreshing when you find people from both parties that are independents or whatever, that are willing to work together on some things. And the board that I was on, the college board, was a nonpartisan board. So there were Republicans and Democrats, and we all had a goal to look at what was best for the college and do that. So those are the kind of things you learn. But I've always said, you need to be involved. Don't sit back and say, I'm not going to vote, because guess what? Somebody's going to win. And if you don't vote, you're actually voting for the one you really don't want to win. So it's so important to get involved, to vote, to build the relationships and make a difference.
Yeah. Your work through thank you for that. I thought that was really important. Led me to another thought, and I just jump in sometimes. Your work with universities, colleges, college boards, school systems. We're obviously talking to a younger generation. What has that taught you throughout your life that you can take away from it? Or and to put it another way is, are there some lessons that you've learned, but also contributions that you wanted to make to that?
So I guess I'm going to go back even further than colleges and universities. So what I learned as an elementary counselor and as a teacher, that all parents love their kids. They don't all necessarily know how to help their kids. And it's important to help people help themselves, but by helping them learn how to help kids and things. So I think that's the first thing. And that's kind of how I kept going down different roads and all this. When it gets to higher ed, I'm at Austin Community College. You pointed out that these, and of course I recognize that. Love being at the community college because our students, by and large, are working 2 or 3 jobs. Many of them are, the average student at ACC is a 26, 27-year-old female who is a woman of color, has 1.2 kids, working 2 jobs to make ends meet. And we are that place that can help those students do well and be able to go on to the University of Texas or Texas State or A&M or wherever they want to go. Or maybe they don't need to. They're getting the certificate or whatever they need. So what I've learned the most is I love all the schools. I am a diehard Longhorn. My doctorate's from there. And yet what I see in our students at ACC, I love seeing because they are working so hard to make their life different. Most of them are not coming from a place of privilege where they could go even to another one, or maybe they just wanted to stay closer to their families, and that's great. And we have wonderful faculty and staff who are there to work with them and help them move on to where they want to go. So I've learned so much. Again, I learned from the students. Just talk to them, listen to their story. Before I came here this morning, I'd been to a reception where a nurse at a children's hospital who had gone through our program and came to this country as a 2-year-old. So he's a DACA person and didn't think he was even going to be able to go. And with help and through Capital Idea and some other things, he was able to go. Got his degree at ACC. Now he's at Dell Children. Met his wife there, who's a nurse as well. It was just a cool story. And there's so many cool stories of the students that we work with.
Yeah.
Am I answering what you asked?
Yes. And the question wasn't as clear as I'd like it to be, but that did hit it, because the whole thing is I'm thinking about the audience that's listening to our podcast and the questions that they would ask. It's about mentorship. It's about also, since you've had this rich background in the education system, there's got to be learnings, also evolvements, how education evolves. One of the things that we have gone out and talked to Gen Z and other individuals is, one of the worries is the future, finance, outcomes. How am I going to get a job? I already had a degree and I tried to get a job. It didn't happen. I go over here. And one of the things that we're seeing, especially with TikTok and social, all of these things, is there's so much advice being given on social as far as what to do, start your own business, do all these the things.
Eat Tide Pods.
Exactly. That there is some anti-university, anti-college thought process there, because they're finding less value. And it's twofold. One, being having a background in finance, knowing where that over the last 20 years, the education costs have just risen by 7% per year for 8% per year for the last 20, 30 years. It is such an expensive gamble to and when you say gamble, it's like the gamble is like, I don't really know what I want to do, and I got to spend this much money to try to figure that out. So it becomes more risk on the table than perhaps earlier generations.
Well, and Gen Z are real savvy, right? And they're real on social media. So Gen Z is out on social media, they're 10, and they're watching millennials cry in their cars because they have 2 college degrees and they're barely making minimum wage. And they're looking at those videos and have been looking at those videos for the entire time that my generation was going through college. And they're like, this is a bad deal. Like that's easy math, right? You're like, so that person's life is ruined and they're in tears and they're saying they wish they hadn't gone. I'm not going to go. Right? Like, and they're watching other people comment this and the job market's terrible and all these things. Like they're watching, they're savvy. Like, and I'm just like, it doesn't surprise me they're not enthralled by the institution of 4-year education.
So go ahead.
So here's a statistic about Central Texas. 10 years ago, 62% of the students who are graduating from high school went directly to college. Today, it's 40%.
Wow.
And it's not that they didn't come to us or to UT. It's they're not going anywhere. So you're right. People have watched and looked at this, and truthfully, it's all gone up way too much. And then you have students that get degrees that, sure, that sounded like a fun thing to get a degree in, but did you really check out what are you going to be able to do with that degree after you get it? So there is much more of a push now of credentials of merit, of credit. I mean, things that you can get a job in. There's a lot of apps and things that you can go put in, I want to be this, or you can put in, here's what all I want when I'm grown. I want to have a car. I want to have a house. I want to have 2 kids, and I want to live in Austin or wherever. And here's the job I want to, or here's the degree I want to get. Well, all that adds up for you, and you can see, might not be the right career to be going into if that's really what I think I want to do. But people are getting better at giving students an opportunity to really think about what they're doing before they do it. Because in the past, it's like, I'm going to college, and parents will go all out if they can to help as well. And then they've got these huge debts that they can't get out of and can't get a job that'll ever pay it off.
Right. And so that becomes the thing. One of the things that I'm really proud of in what I know and working with ACC is one of the challenges that and I'll get more data from you as far as your comments on this, but tuition has stayed the same for the last decade. And so it's ACC is this very community focused. We know you just described your typical student, and you're aware of that. And so it's important for students out there. I think we tell different stories. There are options. Not every college is $100,000 a year.
Correct.
And you've got ways to kind of get there. I mean, you can live at home and go to community college for the first couple of years, and then do different things. So I'm very proud of the work. And so I wanted to ask about that, the decision making behind the scenes, since we've got someone that works behind the scenes, not only keeping costs down, but also evolving with what is needed. Like, we're now in the land of AI. That's the next thing. Is the .com, now the AI. So how does the organization, how does the ACC make those kind of decisions to kind of stay on top?
So we have a new chancellor this year. He started in October, and he's great. He came from Amarillo College. And our board voted 2 months ago for a pilot program for the next 5 years for free tuition. And for anybody that graduated in 2024 that lives within our taxing district, whether it was a GED, public schools, private schools, homeschool, whatever, can go for free to ACC for 3 years to get a 2-year degree. And if it's one of our 4-year degree, for 5 years to do that. With the hope being that if it works, that ultimately it would be free to everybody to do this. And with the idea of, because if we're doing that, hopefully they can go full time so they get in and out faster. Because I described the person that's trying to come back to school, they need to get in the workforce pretty quickly. And so we're trying to help that move along. We have a lot of innovative people. AI is certain. It's not in my world. I'm in, public affairs and operations, but our provost and different people that are looking, and how do we start using AI in our classes and things? We have a lot of people that are on the cutting edge and looking at how do we make things better. We have, there's an amazing faculty person who left the university and came to the community college because She wanted to teach. Yes, she does research, believe me, but she really wanted to be able to spend her time on focusing on helping students learn the things they need to learn or should learn to help them be successful. Did I answer what you asked?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just the decision, the thought process that goes into it. Because I think that, not being behind the scenes, knowing how those decisions are made, a lot of times there's this prevailing thought on social media, and that's all they're listening to. And it is, as we talked about, sometimes it's anti this or not going to this or things are dropping off. And it's this sentiment. But it's important to see the other side of that. There are individuals on the other side thinking deeply about society and how to make offerings that are free or low. I mean, you can't get cheaper than free, accessible, and cutting edge.
Right. And we are going through a theory of change, clearly thinking of what is our focus, where do we want to go? We want to be the very best college in the country, and Russell Lowry Hart is our chancellor, and we will be that in 5 years, and I believe it will. And that's why I'm retiring, because I'm 69, and I'm going to miss getting to be a part of seeing that happen. I'll be watching from afar, but what are the changes you make? How do you help the students? How do you give them wraparound services? Because the things that our students are really needing today, when you ask them the questions, they will say tuition's a lot, and ours is dirt cheap as it was before we even did this. But the other things, it's food insecurity, it's housing insecurity, it is childcare needs. There's all these things that don't have anything to do with learning in the classroom. But if you don't deal with those, you are not going to be able to concentrate and do what you need to do. So part of our charge is, how do we help students better understand all these services are there for them? And we've got all kinds of ways to help our students, and are constantly looking at others.
Wow. I love that. Well, with that, we'll end on that note. Thank you very much for being with us.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me. And it's good to meet all of you. And for all the young people that are listening, go for it. You can do whatever you want to do. You just have to take that first step and know that you are capable, and you're supposed to be where you are.
I love
Thank
that.
you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Dr. Molly Beth Malcolm, for sharing your inspiring and insightful words of wisdom. Her dedication to education, her passion for community service, and her belief in the power of mentorship are truly motivating. As we navigate our own uncharted paths, let's remember the valuable lessons shared today to seize opportunities, trust ourselves, and make a difference in our communities. Stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore and address the challenges and triumphs of life, particularly through the lives of Gen Z. Thank you to all who contributed to make this show possible. Check out our show notes for more information on how you can get involved, and be sure to follow us on our socials and subscribe to us on your favorite listening platform. From the Founding Up team, keep exploring the uncharted.